it's been many days of frustrating thinking on this thing. The engine rotates the wrong direction for the diffs to be driving forward. At the end of the day, I've decided to go back to the concept of just flipping the diffs upside down so that they run the right direction, because then we can turn the engine back around. We don't need any extra chains and sprockets and jack shafts. We just run the output straight from the engine, straight into this chain case, which would be something like this. And then we've got our outputs for our front and rear differential. Everything's spinning the right direction, and we don't have to add in a whole bunch of extra complicated parts just to get things to where they need to be. We'll go ahead and flip this diff and see what I got to do to get it mounted, and then start building a chassis.
You.
After like most of a week of just like staring at this and trying to figure out all the problems, I finally have the engine mounted to the table and this front suspension section mounted to the table. And the engine mount, it turns out, I accidentally made it super handy because you can tap this bolt out here. It's a little snug. So you pull the bolt, and if you need to access anything under the engine, it just hinges on the other side.
What?
And then you just, you know, this is what I did to put the diff in earlier, is just balanced it on my head while I put the diff in. So that's kind of a cool feature.
That's super cool.
So I've been chopping up this little section of frame here, and I keep going back and forth on what to do with it, but my final plan is, since the diff is now upside down, none of the diff mounts work on this frame, so like, there's basically nothing left of it that's usable aside from the mounts for the suspension, but like everything around them has to be changed. So what I'm gonna do now is just grab some scraps of steel and tack them to the table and then to both arms so that they stay in place. And then I'll just remove this whole section of frame and build a new one in the shape that I need it. But that way the suspension arms stay straight and aligned and in the right orientation. It'd be easier than like taking all the measurements and getting it all right, because then I can just build the new one up to that and up to the engine and the diff and get it all where we want it. Also, I'm going to move the diff back a little bit, something like that, to get more space in front of it for the steering, because the steering is going to go up front now.
We're going to take a quick break from the Jeep and talk about the sponsor for this video, AutoBidmaster. So this is it, guys. This is autobidmaster.com. Ethan and I have been scanning, looking for some part quads, looking for maybe our next project car, something to swipe the transmission from for the 2J mower. So in a lot of states, you are not able to buy salvaged cars. So AutoBidmaster works as a broker, so you can, even if you're in one of those states. So you just look up Polaris, for example. We got jet skis, side-by-sides, a slingshot. They seriously have everything on here, and is any condition, just totally totaled to just a little bit of still runs and drives, just some scratches or whatever. So let's say we wanted this slingshot. We'd click here, check it out, see the pictures. It'd actually be pretty fun to do something like this someday, but not quite balling that hard yet. So let's say you see $20,000 worth of value here. You can bid up to $20,000, and what it's gonna do is upbid for you in $100 increments. So you're gonna pay the lowest price if you get the top bid here. And with shipping, they're partnered with easyhaul.com, so it's all built into the site. You can see if they'll ship it right to your door. Also, when you buy a car from AutoBidmaster, They're going to take care of the documents and all the paperwork and the delivery, while they just keep you up to date and informed on the status of your vehicle. So head on over to autobidmaster.com and check it out. You can click the link in our description to get there, and our subscribers will get $50 off a year-long membership if you use the code GHPC. So go down there, check it out. Now let's get back to building.
So I got the rear all welded in place and got the frame all cut out of there and the diff mounted to the table. So now the whole rear end is mounted where I want it. I actually moved the rear diff back a little bit and straightened it out. In the ATV, it was kind of canted to one side, just, I don't know, for whatever reason, to make the drive shaft line up, or who knows why, but that's how they had it. Anyway, so, and it was moved forward of the center line, which, you know, we've got a lot of weight up front, so I wanted to move it back to get weight a little bit better, and also so that I'd have a little more space between these two. So next up, I'm going to do the same with the front diff. The suspension's already welded in place, of course, but the diff is just sitting there. It's also empty. We still haven't gotten a new one for that, but the housing will do everything I need it to at this point.
I think this is such a good idea, just getting everything all welded to the table and set up.
It's gonna make it a lot easier.
Yeah.
And then these are all of the main components aside from steering that, well, in terms of moving parts. You know, once we have all of this laid out, then it's just a matter of building the chassis around it to hold it all in place. And a seat will go right here. Oh, also, obviously, this diff is upside down now. That's the drain plug. Forgot to mention that. Obviously, we knew I was flipping it, but it's all upside down. And then, yeah, and then it'll just be, you know, shock towers, and this is basically all of the moving parts. I've been sitting here rearranging drivetrain components for the last hour, and I think I've come up with a plan. This, you can see, is actually it's just sitting there, but it happens to fit right onto the very end of that, just a tiny bit. So that will work perfectly right there with just the one U-joint. So my next step is going to be to take this shaft out of the gearbox and then take this and adapt it so that they can work together. So these two splines here happen to be the same, so I'll take either one of them, cut it off of what it's on, and then weld it onto the end of this shaft. And conveniently, these splines are just a tiny bit smaller than the shaft, which is good, because they need to be, because that still needs to be able to come out through the transfer case, chain case thing here. So the reason I'm going to go ahead and make this shaft is because until I know how long it is exactly, I can't mount this box. So that'll be the next step, and then I'll probably angle it as it is here so it's a little bit tilted so that it points this shaft straight at the front differential, in which case, again, I only need one U-joint up there, whereas if I moved this over here so it was straight down the axis of the vehicle, then I'd need a double U-joint over there to get it straight again. Started off today by making this little thing, which I wouldn't have had to make if it had come with the chain case. but it didn't. It's just a little spacer because this shaft has to be able to go all the way through, so it has to be no larger than the inside of the bearings. So that spacer just seals up against the seal surface there, and then it has a groove inside of it for an O-ring so that it can seal around the shaft. You can see in there, it's got a little groove. So that'll sit right here. I made that on the lathe out of a chunk of this super duper thick wall tubing. Now that I've got that, I know how much space I have to work with on this shaft, and I'm gonna cut this piece of shaft off of here and attach it to there. I got this piece of shaft turned down to fit inside of that one, and I got this one shortened a bit and turned down so that these splines can fit over it, so that this can go on here, and it'll probably, when it's being driven, sit about, you know, somewhere in there. But then if you want to disengage, or if you want to take the drive shaft off, it'll be on the diff right here, and I'll put this up to it so you can see how far it moves. So then if you want to, you know, detach it, you can just go shook, and it'll pop right off of the diff end.
That's perfect. So we'll be able to take out the chain case and take everything apart if anything breaks.
Mm-hmm. More like when something breaks.
Yeah.
I hope it's none of this, but at the same time I'm working with somewhat hardened steel here, and I'm about to weld it, which always changes the temper.
Looks strong.
Should be. Went with TIG welding because it's cleaner and stronger and more precise, so it should be nice and straight too. Let's shove it back through here. Let's see what it looks like. Shaft's all welded, it fits through the chain case still. Got our little spacer that I made this morning on there, and then this goes all the way on there. So then we can position this right about here, and then if you want to push it on, you just go like that. So it'll sit somewhere in there. Now we have drive to the rear wheels.
That is too cool.
And now when I move this around, it will stay in the position it needs to be for the rear end, you know.
Yeah.
There's no version that's wrong now. If we make a mark here, and a mark here, and we make a mark on one of these here wheels, hubs, whatever, you can find out the final drive.
And so what does it say on your phone?
2.78 is what I have as the math for this gear ratio multiplied by this gear ratio.
Let's see if we're close.
So that's 1, 2, and that's full rotation there. And here we have 0. So with our 86 degrees of rotation from where it stopped to back to the start point, if you add 2.78 plus 0.23, you get 101. So with all the error in our marker marks, it's basically 2.78 to 1.
Perfect. So she's gonna go 100.
That's the theory.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows if it'll have the power to do 100, but in theory, right now, maximum horsepower out of this engine happens at 8,500 RPM, give or take. And according to gearing calculators, using the gearing, final drives and all that inside the engine, and then this gear reduction and our tire size, 8,500 RPMs in 6th gear should equal 101 miles an hour.
Yes.
And it doesn't redline at 8,500. It can go past that. I've seen dyno graphs, and it goes up to like 9.5, but it loses power pretty much drastically right after around 8,500 to 9. So,
so she's
anyway,
gonna hit 100.
If it's making peak horsepower exactly at 100 miles an hour in 6th gear, that's perfect. That's the best chance we have to hit 100.
Yes, it's perfect. It's exactly what we wanted. 100 horsepower and 100 miles an hour.
Yep.
And reverse and all-wheel drive.
And reverse and all-wheel drive. All of the things.
So sick.